you deserve a break from it all. Relax with us. We're Sacramento Smooth Jazz.
Welcome back to Sacramento Smooth Jazz, your home for exceptional melodies and, of course, artist insights. Today, we are honored to host a master on the keys, none other than keyboardist and composer Brian Simpson. Now, he's renowned for his soul-stirring love ballads, his chart-topping party anthems, and, of course, the sheer magic of his melodies. Brian's musical journey began after graduating from Northern Illinois University. His story took an exciting turn when he ventured into the bustling music scene of Los Angeles, where he seamlessly fused jazz and R&B. Late night jam sessions saw him sharing stages with the likes of Everett Hart, Boney James, and Norman Brown, just to name a few. And because of his versatility knows no bounds, he's toured the world alongside pop icons like Tina Marie, Sheena Easton, and Janet Jackson, of course, and his collaborations. It reads like a who's who of jazz, including George Duke, Stanley Clarke, Larry Carlton, and many more. And for nearly 2 decades, Brian has served as the musical director for jazz saxophonist Dave Koz, while also steering the Smooth Jazz cruise to great height. Get ready for an engaging conversation with the musical genius, Brian Simpson. Welcome to Sacramento Smooth Jazz. How are you today?
Well, that was quite an introduction. No one ever called me a musical genius, at least but thank you.
You are more than welcome. Listen, it is your history. It's your history. I'm just reading a partial of your history, and it is amazing.
It's been a wild ride. You know, I never, honestly, when I was a little kid growing up here in Illinois, I never met the people I would end up working with and the places I'd end up traveling to and the venues I'd get to perform in. It's taken me to most corners of the globe, and it's just been incredible. Really, I'm very grateful to be here. And it's great talking to you right there in one of my favorite places to be, Sacramento.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. We are privileged to have you. I know you're super busy. You're touring. You're just doing your thing all over the country right now. So thank you for parking for just a few minutes to give us insight into what's going on with you. So real quick here, now you've had the privilege of collaborating with some legendary musicians over the years, no doubt. We talked about George Duke, Stanley Clarke, just to name a few. How has those experiences influenced your own musical journey, and what lessons have you taken from working with such greats?
Well, I was the longest tenure I had with someone at that level was with George Duke. I was his kind of his right-hand man for 10 years in his band, and he introduced me to some production work as well. He had a studio at his house, and where he produced all the hits, many hit songs for Jeffrey Osborne, Denise Williams, songs we all know were done right there at that studio. So I got to know his engineer very well, and I started learning about every part, every aspect, the creative aspect, but then actually producing the music, which is so important, getting your thoughts down on tape and then ultimately on a record or CD. And now it's just going to be streamed, but it was just wonderful working with George, just because his knowledge was so vast and his playing ability, it was awesome. And from every artist I worked with, though, I would take aspects of what they did live, say, keep that in my back pocket. Like, yeah, I'd like to do that, or that's something I don't necessarily want to do when I perform live. And I've learned something from absolutely everybody I've worked with.
Speaking of everybody, George, no doubt about it, he has a wonderful talent. He was. Now, with respect to George Duke, Stanley Clarke, your career has taken some intriguing turns. I mean, late night jazz sessions to touring with Tina Marie, Sheena Easton, and Janet Jackson. A very contrasting experience, no doubt. How has that shaped your music working with them? And can you share a standout memory from your time on the road with those artists?
I'll just say one thing about Janet Jackson is that, first of all, it was the first time and the last time to be on a tour of that level, where you're literally touring with 60 crew members and your own chef. And, everywhere we went was custom made meals in every country, in every city, in every country, which was, I never got the chance to travel at that level. It was amazing. Musically, also incredible music, and the musicians were so good. But I was always curious, can she really, sometimes you hear a singer like that in popular music, you don't know what's done in the studio, can they really sing? But there was one of the first sound checks we were doing we started the tour in Australia, and it was during a sound check when not all the equipment was up yet, and we needed to rehearse this one song that was just me and Janet together. That's how the song started. And she was far down on the stage, and I was way up where my keyboards were. And I was telling her, I said, I can't hear you sing because the monitors weren't hooked up yet. So she came up to where I was playing, and sang the song. I believe the song was called Again, and sang it right in my ear. You know, it was Janet Jackson singing into my ear while I'm playing the song with her. And you know what? She sounded beautiful. So I know they didn't have to do any trickery in the studio. She really did sound like
wow.
that. So that was a pretty cool moment.
You know, that's a fascinating, memory right there, an experience to just have someone of that magnitude come right next to you during rehearsal and then hear you guys right there, and she's not being a diva. She's like, okay, you can't hear me? I'll walk up to you.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, she was a very sweet person. I mean, she had no attitude whatsoever. She was a joy to work with.
Nice. Now, let's talk about you for a moment here. You have your latest release, Soul Connection.
Mm-hmm.
Magnificent piece of work there, let me tell you, and
right.
I'm not just saying it because, I play music. I'm a fan. When I'm talking to you guys, I really am liking your music. And Soul Connection, that's a title that reflects your musical mission of creating a message of love, I understand. Can you go deeper into the significance of this title and how you aim to touch the soul of your audience with this?
Well, as my career evolves, my music evolves. I mean, I've written now and produced over 100 songs. I don't know the exact number, but it's a lot of music. And as I've evolved as a musician, as a songwriter, I'm also getting to know my audience better and better. I have more chances to interact at live shows and through social media. And the greatest feeling I'll ever get is when someone will come up to me and show and say, this song or this album really got me through a tough time. My husband was dying or some kind of something that someone was going through and they needed a little help, that my music was able to comfort someone. It's just the greatest feeling. And it happens all over the world because that's the kind of reach our music has these days. And to know that you've done something that helps someone is just the greatest feeling in the world. And so there is that connection and it reaches, someone's soul. So I had that in mind when I was starting this album. I'm really thinking mostly about my fans when I make this music. So that's kind of where that came from.
Nice. And, I'm looking at your collection of albums that you've done, and it's interesting because I have my personal notation here of the many tracks for each one that I happen to find in my playlist. I said to myself before we got on the phone, I said, I have a lot of Brian Simpson going back to your first one. And I find that for me personally, when I'm casually just listening, and I go, wait a minute, what's this I'm hearing here? And I go, that's another Brian Simpson track. Now, I can name so many like you, but Mojave's comes up quite often. Waiting comes up. Blues for Scott, going back a little bit in time here, because that was a different flavor. And I'm like, wait a minute here, what's going on? And
well, let me tell you this, there's something sometimes there'll be something you learned in school, maybe in high school or college, where one teacher told you a phrase or a line that just sticks with you the rest of your life.
Yes.
Well, I had an experience like that. I had a teacher in my music history class that would always say, 3 most important things in music are unity, variety, and continuity. And for whatever reason, the only place I ever heard it, I've never read it again before or since, but that stuck in my mind. And I always am striving to not just, nothing I hate worse than listening to someone's album and every song sounds like it's in the same key, same tempo, same vibe. And it's like, is that all this person's got? I mean, for God's sakes, so I am striving for that variety. You want the unity. I use the same piano. That piano that you hear is on every single album since 1995 that I've made. So that is the continuity, let's say, is the sound, my sound. It's always the same. It's the same instrument.
Yes.
I decided right away when I was going to start my career, I really need to pick a sound and stick with it. And it's going to be this piano. So that's what I did. And then, the unity is the fact that I am either the composer or co-composer of 95% of the music. And then the variety, that's where that comes in, is I do work with different writers. I co-write a lot and I get variety because of that, because of the way we produce the music. I'm working with different guys and they have their own ideas of how to take a song somewhere. But so it does. I try to maintain those elements, and I think it's been the best thing for me because I have noticed that my Spotify listeners are vast and I think that has a lot to do with it, that I don't always sound the same. And I don't think anyone would be surprised that if someone was a fan of my music, they're not going to get the new album and say, oh my God, he changed completely. But it'll just be enough to say, oh, he's not doing the same old thing again. So That's what I want to avoid, is just delivering the same sounding music every time, because it's easy to fall into traps when you're a composer of 100 songs.
Right. And, you've done a very good job at what you've just said there. You've collaborated with so many. For example, your Unified album is a testament to that. With Steve Oliver, you have some tracks with Bonnie James, Adam Hawley. So hearing these differences, the first 15 seconds, I'm going, okay, yep. And sometimes even the first key, you can tell there's a different collaboration here. So you have different flavors with each project. Now, your music is often described as a fusion of jazz, R&B, funk, blues, and soul. How has those diverse influences come together in your latest album, Soul Connection? And you talked about the message that you hope to convey to the listeners, those diverse influences. You talk jazz, the funk, the blues. You got all that, and it shows in your playing, especially when people see you live.
Well, for sure. I mean, I grew up in a house that listened to mostly traditional jazz, but there was Ramsey Lewis, there was Booker T and the MGs, which was more, especially Booker T. That was kind of that 60s R&B flavor. I mean, it was mostly funky. You don't think of Booker T as necessarily jazz, but it's contemporary jazz to me, to my ears in the 60s. I just love that. And I wouldn't, some people would be kind of a snob with their jazz. Like, no, it's got to be Coltrane or Charlie Parker or Miles Davis, or else it sucks, And hey, I've certainly gone through periods of my life when I was younger where I was kind of like that, where I was like, oh no, I don't want to hear any electronic things. I don't want to hear an electric piano or electric guitar. And I want all acoustic jazz. But, I got through that. And I understand when someone is like that. There's people to this day that, just like there are fans of smooth jazz, let's say, you put some traditional jazz on, they're like, oh no, I don't want to hear that, So people will pick what they like, and I can appreciate that. But I have learned to embrace all the variations, and it's such a better world for you if you can learn to enjoy different styles and genres. So you asked how that influenced me or what, but absolutely. I mean, everything that I've ever heard, from Earth, Wind and Fire to Marvin Gaye with the R&B. I mean, you're just absorbing these things, plus all the traditional jazz. I love big band jazz. I love Count Basie. This kind of stuff, it's all, it's hard to pinpoint where does that show up in my music. I don't know, but you're just absorbing these things. And then when I'm creating music, I know one thing, that the music I've loved, no matter what genre it was, I loved it because it felt good. And feel good is typically a rhythm thing, whatever kind of music it is. I mean, a polka can feel good. It's just, are these musicians killing it? That's the thing. So I remember reading Charlie Parker loved country and western.
Right.
So there.
Right.
What does that tell you?
What's interesting is that a friend of mine, like me 6-7 years ago, he said, hey man, you want to go to a country concert? And I'm like, really? Country? Yeah, I'll do it. And I went to it, and I had an amazing time because those musicians were top notch. I had a great time at a country concert because those musicians made the music feel good.
Oh yeah. Yeah, exactly. And when it's honest and it feels, any music can be a total joy. If it's honest, it's played well, by pros. That's what it's all about. I'm just trying to, I'm very humble. I know guys that technically play rings around me, but that isn't always where it's at. To me, it's in the message. Are you a musician that can deliver a message? And that's kind of the difference between a guy that you just hear playing on the side all the time and an artist out front. The artist has to be able to deliver the message. He may not play the fastest, the highest, or the loudest, but are you saying anything anybody wants to hear, through your instrument? So that's all I strive for.
And it works well for you, and it shows in the music. Now, you're a master of orchestrating moods in your music. What was your creative process when crafting the tracks for Soul Connection, your latest release? Are there any unique techniques you employ to ensure your music resonates for the audience?
Yeah, that's another thing. It's a good question. When I was in my teens and starting to learn the piano and learning about chords, I was fascinated about, why does music make me feel a certain way, and why do I gravitate towards, and this I'm talking about not just vocal music, but instrumental music, a good jazz record collection. There's certain albums that I was just, wow, that makes me feel not necessarily happy or sad, maybe a little melancholy, but it's just kind of, I love those emotions. And then as I was learning the piano, I started realizing where that comes from. It's from the chords. Chords create, you don't even need the harmony, just you don't need a melody per se, just a harmonic background can create an emotional reaction from active listener. And, or if you're sensitive, not all people listen to music and have that sensitivity, but if you're lucky, you do. and music can touch you that way. And I had that. And then I was learning about not just a plain major chord or minor chord, but a minor chord with alterations to it, the minor 9, the minor 11. And in the way you alter these chords, that's like you start manipulating emotions, sort of. So that fascinated me. And that's what I think about when I am writing any, especially a slower ballad. It's like, how can you touch someone's emotionally? And if you can do that, it's like a magic trick. You've unlocked something right there, and you can affect someone through their ears, emotionally. That's what it's all about. So I'm always striving for that as well.
You go really deep into the making and the creation of your music, I should say. You go really deep with it, which is great because it translates into a wonderful experience for the listeners. And I can speak for that person. Of course, our listeners can speak to that as well. How can people reach you on social media, websites? What's out there for you? Oh, yeah.
You find me on Facebook or Instagram, and I have a website, bsimpsonmusic.com. I'm easy to find. I'm all over there. Just type in Brian Simpson, and then
it pops right up. On a side note, is a funny thing I found out that there is a comedian with your name.
Yes, sir.
With the same name as you.
Yes. Well, if you go on Instagram, you can see a very funny video where we actually met, because he went on an interview with David Letterman, talked about me. And then, so we agreed to have a meeting at a jazz festival, and it was very funny. You can see the result. I put the video up on Instagram. So
yeah, I saw it. It is absolutely hilarious. And it was definitely fun-spirited, no doubt. So ladies and gentlemen, we're speaking with Brian Simpson. I got so caught up that I forgot to tell you who we're talking to again. So ladies and gentlemen, we're talking with composer and keyboardist Brian Simpson. He's given us a few minutes today. We're almost done here, but again, go on Instagram, Brian Simpson Piano on Instagram, Facebook, Brian Simpson Jazz, bsimpsonmusic.com. He is not hard to find. He is not trying to hide. And his latest project, Soul Connection, definitely connects. I encourage you to check it out. Definitely support him because he's a good one, no doubt about it. I really appreciate you hanging out with us today. Thank you for sharing.
My pleasure. And I look forward to coming back to Sacramento.
Absolutely. We're definitely going to have you. That is for sure. In fact, let's do this before we go. You want to introduce one of your tracks from your latest project for our listeners?
Sure. This song I decided to name for a city where I actually started the Dave Koz cruise last year, because we did 3 weeks in Spain and Portugal. And the city we started in was Barcelona. So I had created this song and decided to name it Barcelona, and it has become very popular right now.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you hear it right here. Brian Simpson, and he wants you to hear Barcelona right here on Sacramento Smooth Jazz. Brian, thank you so much for your time today.
You're very welcome.
Thanks for listening to Sacramento Smooth Jazz. To continue listening to Smooth Jazz 24/7, follow Sac Smooth Jazz on social media and listen by going to sacsmoothjazz.fm.